Welcome to District 31 Club Close-Up, a video series where I interview clubs from District 31. We learn about their clubs, the great things they're doing to engage their existing members, and what they're doing to recruit new ones. I'm Christian Austin, the 2023-2024 Public Relations Manager of District 31. And today, we're here with the North Shore Toastmasters Club, a select distinguished club earning 7 out of 10 points in the Distinguished Club program, not just this year, but last year as well. So let's applaud North Shore Toastmasters for achieving that select distinguished status, which many clubs are not able to achieve. They were founded in 1966, so they're one of the district's older clubs, and they meet in person in Peabody, Massachusetts. I provide some more information at the very end on how you can join a meeting, and there'll also be at the end of the video information on where to go in Peabody to join one of the North Shore Toastmaster Club's meetings. Today, we'll be running a panel discussion. I'll be the panel moderator, and all of our officers of North Shore Toastmasters Club joining us here today will be the panelists. When somebody has a response to one of my questions, they'll raise their hand and I'll call on them. We can go around and all of the officers of the club can feel free to elaborate on any of the answers that somebody else has given. So I want all of you as our audience today to make sure to get out that notepad, get out that pen, and make sure you're ready to take some notes because you are going to gain some great wisdom on this video interview today. But before we get started, let's go around our virtual Zoom room here and learn a little bit about each of the North Shore Toastmaster officers. In no particular order, just what I see on the Zoom screen. Let's start with Jim. Jim, can you please introduce yourself?
Thank you, Chris. I am a legacy Toastmaster member, joined back in the 1994-95. And 4 years ago, when I retired and had an opportunity to fill in my schedule a little better, it occurred to me that I wanted to rejoin Toastmasters and be part of that experience and maybe be part of a club growth and club success and individual success for people that come through our club. It's been a wonderful experience for me, and I look forward to another wonderful year here coming up July 1st.
Thank you for that, Jim. And just for everyone, this video is being filmed in June. As Jim said, our Toastmaster year begins in July 1. So we are not that far away from the next Toastmaster year. And Jim, 1994, 1995, a well-experienced Toastmaster. He goes back to probably North Shore Toastmasters. You may have been part of other clubs as well before North Shore Toastmasters, going back to that time frame. Thanks for the introduction, Jim. Let's go now to our next club officer that I see on my Zoom screen, Eddie. Eddie, can you please introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Eddie Rhodes. I've been a member for 2 years as of last April. And shortly after I joined, I was asked if I would be interested in becoming an officer. At the time, I didn't want to get too involved in anything heavy, so they said, try Sergeant at Arms. So I did, and I've actually loved it. I've jumped into the position. I've made a few changes, added a few things. I start the meeting with a gavel, and I start off with "Hear ye, hear ye." I'd like to call tonight's meeting to order, and something along those lines. I kind of make it, very old-fashioned, and it gets people smiling, but it also gets people involved. At least that's my opinion. And so here I am, and I'm going into this new year as Sergeant at Arms once again. And hopefully next year I'll get out of my shell and move up the ladder.
Thank you for that, Eddie. Getting out of your shell or not, being a club officer, jumping into that role as early as you did, and then re-upping your role as Sergeant at Arms again this year, that's a message to everyone. You can be a new Toastmaster, and that doesn't mean that you can't be an officer of your club. Talk to your club about leadership within the club as well. It's not just about speaking, and take that leadership role as Eddie did, and take one of those roles such as Sergeant at Arms. Thank you for that, Eddie. Moving on now to Faye. Faye, can you please introduce yourself?
Sure, happy to. Hi, everybody. I'm Faye Lacasse. I'm president of North Shore Toastmasters. And I started my journey in the Boston Copley Square Toastmasters Club in 2016. And I walked into that room because I had all these ideas in my head, but I had no voice. I had a voice, but I didn't have the confidence to use it. And I could tell from the first meeting that Toastmasters was the place where I was going to not just learn how to find my voice, but learn from other speakers trying to find their voices. And honestly, Christian, it was by becoming a club officer. I became VP of membership that first year, worked my way through the ranks and competed in several speech contests along the way. I found my wings along the way over the past few years. Lucky enough to have had a chance to compete this past year as a finalist in the International Speech Contest, and continue to keep learning from everybody around me, not just the speakers, but Christian, people like you, some of the officers that were running this wonderful event. So when I enter a Toastmasters meeting, I feel like every meeting is a learning opportunity, whether it's learning how to speak better, if it's learning how to greet guests graciously, if it's learning how to support other members by evaluating and giving them really, really constructive feedback. Every time I go to a meeting, I learn something. I get better, and I've built some really wonderful friendships in them.
Thank you for that, Faye, and congratulations on advancing to the district final in the speech contest this year. As Faye said, it's about leadership, it's about speaking, but ultimately in doing both of those things, you can find your voice. So if you're looking to get more comfortable in front of people and letting them know the great value that you have, your ideas, think about joining a Toastmasters club. It'll help you find that voice and be able to convey those ideas to other people, just as Faye did when she found Boston Copley Square Toastmasters as her first club and then moved on to North Shore Toastmasters. Thank you for that, Faye. Moving on now to Ed. Ed, can you please introduce yourself?
Now that I'm unmuted, you can hear me okay? All right. Hey, everybody. Ed Alexander here. I'm currently the webmaster of our club, and we just recently elected to be the club president for the coming year, which is, I am nothing without everybody else you see on this screen. The only way I could even dare to do anything that I do in my life is because of a supportive group like this Toastmasters Club. I joined in 1990, and so like Jim, I'm a veteran. I actually sunsetted my involvement for a few years because of business travel, then returned to the club. So it's not there's a broken period of time in there, and I say broken loosely, where I wasn't a member of any club just because of business. So that makes me a repeat offender, I guess. In any event, this environment of a Toastmasters club has been the single biggest contributor to my success and everything I've done over the past 30-odd years of my life. I couldn't on a dare 30 years ago do half of what I'm invited to do and willingly do now, which is, speak at conferences, MC meetings. And it's all because of using the learning lab of a Toastmasters club to help share feedback and help one another learn and progress. And boy, don't we see it incrementally. Every single meeting I hear somebody say to somebody else, you did something differently and better than you did last time. This is totally apart from the formal evaluation process. Just conversationally, I hear the generosity of our members. casually passing along other tidbits beyond the evaluation formalities, just to help one another improve in their game. And I've been a benefactor of that as well. So, I can't speak more highly of the team, the group of people that we have in our club, and the supportive nature of our club.
Thank you for that, Ed, and congratulations on being the next president of North Shore Toastmasters. As you heard from Ed, long-term member from 1990, edited on how long that was, about 30 years or so from when he indicated. But Toastmasters is a learning lab. Ed is even learning still after being part of Toastmasters that long. And that's where he got his confidence from, belonging to the Toastmasters Club, gaining that confidence, and progressing each time as members do when they join a North Shore Toastmasters meeting. It's about that incremental progress. Thank you for that, Ed. And last but not least, Pete, our VP of Education. Can you please introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Pete. I'm the current VP of Education. I've have 17 years. It's been 17 years I've been a member of North Shore Toastmasters. I joined the spring of 2007, and that June I was asked to become a club officer. And since that time, I've held a variety of different club officer roles. In my time with Toastmasters, it's helped me become a more competent and confident communicator, and it's especially enabled me to become a more effective communicator. Back to you, Kristen.
Thank you for that, Pete. Competent, confident, and effective communicator, and joining the Officer Corps the first year of Toastmasters. That's a message for all of you out there who are wondering, is Toastmasters really the right fit for me? I want to get better at speaking, but I don't know. Is it really going to make me more confident and confident? Well, it did for Pete. And if you're thinking about leadership and you think you're too new, you can step into the Officer Corps your first year. What better way to gain experience in leadership other than stepping into that learning lab? Thank you, officers, for the introduction. Now that we're acclimated with North Shore Toastmasters, let's get started with our panel discussion. My first question for all of you is, can you describe an aspect of your club that other clubs may not have that adds value for your members? Faye.
One thing that we've heard frequently from guests that come to visit our meetings is the quality of the agenda that we have at every meeting. It is a consistent and very intentional agenda that is actually showcased on a dry erase board on the stage of our auditorium. And the agenda is such that the first part of the meeting is made up of 1 to 2 minute, what we call mini speeches. That would involve the word of the day, a business tip, a speech tip, a membership tip, and a joke of the day. Then we progress to the prepared speeches, and then we move on to table topics and evaluations and the feedback portion of the meeting. And every meeting follows that really intentional agenda. And it not only provides a comfort level for the guests so that they can see what is expected at every meeting, but it really provides multiple opportunities for members and guests to come up and hone the craft of public speaking. So I think that that really intentional agenda is something that we've heard feedback on that is different from other groups.
Intentional agenda planned out and lots of opportunities to people to come up and practice those speaking skills, because that's how we get better at speaking. Thank you, Faye. Would anyone else like to elaborate on what Faye has said? Jim.
I'm going to chime in and offer a couple of comments on what I believe are factors in our club health and club growth. Anyone coming to our meeting for the first time walks into an auditorium where there are wonderful seating and a stage that's above the audience, and it creates an impression of this is serious. We're here to learn, we're here to develop, but it's also an in-person environment. which creates even a greater opportunity to get quality feedback from other members and to sort of emulate what it's like to give a presentation or a speech, because you have an audience in front of you, you have a stage. And I think that environment contributes significantly to the club's ability to recruit new members. They see it, they recognize that it's professionally orchestrated, and it's something they may want to become part of. And we've seen that in the club growth this past year.
Thank you for that, Jim. That environment that you walk into, you know this is a serious speaking environment, because where do you see speakers that are speaking in front of a large audience? But an auditorium where you have the speaker up on the stage, the opportunity to go to the North Shore Toastmasters meeting and speak in that venue and become comfortable. Pete.
Kristen and team, I also believe that when prospects, guests and prospects come in and participate in their first club meeting, that they observe the caliber of our members. And I think that they make a connection, that they look at several of the speakers, whether they're newer speakers and they see speakers are getting, coached through icebreakers, or whether they see our veteran speakers and they see the caliber of those veteran speakers and they say, I can learn from that person. And during the meeting, whether it's the flow of the meeting or toward the end of the meeting, I think the new members and guests can also sense the collegiality among our members. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Pete. Collegiality, that's the word of the day today. So everyone remember that and try to use that in your speeches. But seeing a speaker that is equivalent to where you are, gaining comfort because of that, and then also aspiring up to those other speakers that you can use as an example of what are they doing to help me get better at my speaking as well. You'll get all of that at North Shore Toastmasters. Would anyone else like to say anything else, or should we move on to the next question? All right, Ed?
We could spend all evening on this single question. And I think the question was, is there an aspect of our club that adds value for members that perhaps other clubs may not have? I will confess that it wasn't always this way. But as recently as, I know Pete can talk about this and Jim can also, as recently as, 5 years ago, maybe, it was, the membership of our club was rather monolithic. Probably the best way to put it. Mostly over 50-year-old men. And we looked at each other around the table and said, what's wrong with this picture? Now, I have to give the gang credit because, first of all, that question got asked. What's wrong with this picture? There's a whole rainbow of people in the world who can also benefit and deserve to benefit from the environment of a Toastmasters club. Now, I have to say, I don't think we did anything deliberate to recruit women, young, old, different nationalities, languages. We didn't do that. However, we did make it a point to be more deliberate about how we welcomed guests into our club so that we could maybe be a little more sticky in attracting their different folks. And Faye, you probably can speak to this because you were one of the most recent female members of our club, women, that gender anyway, that identity. And since the last 5 years, we have really become quite a diverse society of members. For all anything I mentioned earlier, young, old, male, female, other gender identity, other first language than English. I think that really helps make it an attractive environment insofar as it's more likely that a guest will see someone like themselves and say, I can see myself fitting in because I see an example. I see a role model. It's also valuable because for a person who has not been maybe as exposed to a diverse environment, they see that there's potential value. And I think that's really a benefit and something that we can't necessarily make happen unless we set about deliberately to retain the interest of everybody who walks in the door. And again, it's not any single person, it's all of us collectively thinking the answer to that question is, what could be different about this picture than what it is today? And so here we are now. We've grown how many members in this year? And we all know that not everybody is from the same first language, and it's quite diverse. We're really lucky to have that kind of a blend of people, backgrounds, and interests in our club.
And Ed, I definitely want to touch on the membership that you gained this year as well in a future question, but that self-reflective notion that you talked about says a lot about club leadership as well. To step back and ask yourself the question, what can we be doing different to get that diverse audience of members to come to our club? Without that leadership of the club, you wouldn't be in this position that you are now by asking that question. Let's move on now to our next question. I want to talk a little about education. And looking at the club dashboard, you've had quite a few educational accomplishments this year in your different pathways levels. I'd like to know, what is your process for getting new members engaged in meeting roles and giving speeches?
Pete, did you want to share this question with me? Did you want to begin, or do you want me to begin? Are you still with us, Pete?
Jim, why don't you begin and I'll finish it up.
Okay, great. So the question is, how do we get new members engaged in meeting roles and speeches? It's through one-on-one encouragement, post-meeting most of the time, or at least some of the time, where we spend that extra time with an individual to say, look, what do you want to accomplish and how can we help you get there? And they see in our club that we're not perfect. We all make mistakes, but the important thing is it's fun. We're not machines. We're learning and we're having fun. And I think the most important first step to engaging other people is to communicate that it's okay to take a risk and fail, because it's not that important. It's more important that you accomplish something. So I think that's a key element in building membership. And although I keep coming back to the word environment, it really is a key factor in our success, because we are always encouraging even guests to participate in table topics. When somebody decides on what their path is going to be, and even sooner than that, if they're a new member, we ask them to take on a role. Take on a role, whether it's membership tip, business tip, speech tip, maybe a joke of the day. But all of this gets somebody started, gets somebody getting something out of the program really on. They're not just sitting there in the seat watching the hour and a half go by, but they have an opportunity to get involved. And personally, every time I'm on a stage, I learn a little something. And I think that's an important part of it too, is the opportunity to take risks and get involved. And we encourage that. We have fun, we laugh, and we support people even after they give their comments or their speech, and encourage them to get involved in the formal process, which is pathways. But I think it's, again, back to environment. It's back to creating a situation where people want to participate. I think that's the key. Pete?
I'd like to add 2 points to supplement what Jim has just explained. At each club meeting, we have a whiteboard on the stage, and it displays our agenda. And at the end of the club meeting, we remove the names, and our club president solicits volunteers for each role. And one of the members acts as a scribe, and we fill each meeting role and each speaker slot. And typically, we even have a backup speaker or 2 if somebody cancels out. And moreover, Our webmaster creates and posts a Google Sheets agenda planner online, and members that signed up, they can change or change roles or add be a speaker or even cancel speeches via our online planner. So I think the fact that the whiteboard and the Google Sheets facilitate signing up for roles for new members, whether it's a meeting role or whether it's a actual pathway speech. Over to you, Kristen.
Tim, did you want to elaborate?
Yes, I just wanted to add to that. And that is, I can't understate the importance of evaluation and feedback. And people come to our meetings and they see people involved in mini speeches, but the formal process of project or pathways speeches also creates a feedback through the evaluation resource. In other words, when a person gives a speech, they get a detailed response on what the individual observed. That includes what was really done well, what you might want to work on, and what you might challenge yourself. And it's always positive first, constructive suggestions, end with a positive. But the point is, new members come in and they see that. They see that it's really a thorough meeting, and value comes out of that meeting for everyone who participates. And that's done primarily through the evaluation process of the meeting.
Thank you for that, Jim. And Ed?
Of course. I really am happy to hear that Jim and Pete have really taken on their roles, taken themselves to task, and done all those things to help with the planning process. They're absolutely right. I'm not sure if it should go unsaid, though, that there's something that happens. It's almost an undercurrent, but it's pretty explicit in our meetings. And that is that we conduct our meetings for our guests. In other words, they're not left out. They're not just passively observing what's going on. We describe each meeting role, and that role and that description is done by whoever is the role player at that point. Who's the general evaluator? Stand up and please explain the role for our guests. So you hear us say, we mention our guests often during the course of the meeting and from the outset, so that the guests feel like, oh, it's being explained to me. I'm not lost in the woods here. I can really participate in this. That sets a precedent so that when a person becomes a member, they're also thinking, this is a demonstration meeting for our guests, and how can I help them feel comfortable by explaining my role and taking the time to make sure I'm making eye contact and that that person is engaged in the meeting. So I think that's another important part of how we welcome members and how we get them involved and get them started. And something that neither Pete or Jim said that I have to call them out for and congratulate them about is they've taken on the role of making certain that every new member gets an orientation. At least an hour of a Zoom call going into pathways and walking through some of the basic steps of getting started. So you're not cast adrift with a password and a login and good luck. It's really a hand-holding process for whatever extent it needs to happen. And we gauge that based on the individual. They may need no hand-holding at all, and others really could use the orientation. And it's tailored to that individual. So these folks are really doing a lot behind the scenes, apart from the club meeting that I described, to help people offline, outside of the meeting, get engaged, stay engaged, and find their way forward. That's an important part of running this club, is it doesn't end when the gavel hits the lectern. So good on you guys.
Going above and beyond to help those newer members or guests become acclimated to the club. I know a lot of times we look around the room and we say, oh, there's no guests, so we don't really have to introduce our roles here. Getting into that habit, that's just the way you run meetings. You said run meetings for guests. Something for everyone to keep in mind. There's no wondering, oh, do I need to introduce the roles? No, yes, you do. You're running a meeting for guests, and that is key to making them feel welcome to that meeting. Excellent points, things to consider in your club as well. Moving on, I want to talk about membership. And this is really an astonishing statistic that North Shore Toastmasters had this year. Last year, North Shore Toastmasters recruited 11 members, and that's a great number to be able to recruit. But this year, they've topped that. 16 new members this year. And from what we heard, I think we can gather how they recruited all of these members. But I would like to talk about membership in a little more detail. So you've increased from 13 members at the beginning of last year to now 23 members, a really, really strong club. I'd like to know, what are some of your tips or best practices that you can give to recruit members? And we've already talked about how you welcome guests, but how do you follow up with them? And do you have a system that's in place? So anyone who would like to speak to that, Faye.
So unfortunately, our VP of membership isn't here tonight, but I can tell you for 2 years in a row, we had some really strong VPs of membership. Both of them were not only super proactive in responding to inquiries that come through the web, they also have taken that extra step and asked people, do you want to get on the phone? Let me understand what your goals are. And taking that extra step, not relying just on emails, but really making sure that they followed up and understood what the goals were, what piqued the interest of our prospective guests, I think was really part of the recipe for success. There was also really intentional follow-up after the meeting, but Eddie Rhodes, our Sergeant at Arms, who's on the call today, I'd love, Eddie, do you want to share what you do to make new members or new prospective members welcome once they actually come through the door?
Well, first of all, when they come in, they sign the guest book. I'll ask them, are they members or, guests? And because I don't know all the members yet. And they'll say, I'm a guest. So I welcome them, kind of go through what they can expect. I explain to them that they can listen to what's going on in the meeting. But when it gets to what's the part of the meeting, Faye? That guests can speak at the
Table topics.
table topics. Thank you. My brain is fried tonight. I'm sorry. Table topics, which that's my job next meeting. That they can speak if they choose to. They're not forced to, but they can get up if they wish. And I think that kind of takes that onus of they're sitting there, and then all of a sudden they say, hey, you want to come up? They know that they're welcome at that point. And I think that's important. And I've also instituted, when a guest comes in, putting a name tag, giving them a name tag that's a different color than the members. It's red. That way any of the members can recognize them as a guest. And our members, I don't know why, except that they're great people. Guests go up, the members go up to the guests, introduce themselves, ask them if they need it, if they want anything they can do. It's family. And I don't know how else to explain it, but it's just like family. And so I try to make them as welcome as possible when they come in. The members introduce themselves throughout until the meeting starts. And when I start the meeting, it's kind of comical. It's formal, yet it's comical, and it lays a foundation of this is a professional meeting, but it's still relaxed and it's fun. And we even laugh at ourselves. If in a meeting things go wrong, and it was a few months ago, about everything that could go wrong did go wrong. And we just, at the end of the meeting, explained, this is what happens sometimes. Things go wrong, and we just do our very best to just keep the meeting going. And we acknowledge if we screw something up, we acknowledge to the guest there was a mistake. And we're not perfect human beings, but it's still a learning experience. And if we acknowledge these things, the guest feels Well, if I screw up, then nobody's gonna laugh at me or get mad and it's a warm environment. I guess that's where I'm going with this. The whole thing, from the time they come in, I try to introduce myself to every single guest that comes in, and I get them a seat, and the members come over and they talk to them. It's a family environment, and like Jim said earlier, it's still a professional environment because of what we have to offer with the stage and the auditorium. And so that's what we try to do, is just welcome people, and then Faye at the end will ask them, can you give us a little synopsis? How do you feel? Did you learn anything? And so they're given the opportunity to say how they feel. And most of them say that they felt welcome. It was a great, very professional. They liked the agenda. There's always something. And so we encourage them to come back anytime they want, and hopefully they'll become a member someday. That's how we do it.
Thanks, Eddie. Jim?
I just want to add that we maintain a folder that has applications for membership. And while we're not pressing people to become members, if somebody does ask, we have the form that they can take home and complete it, or get back to us with a question if they have a question on the joining process. This is not a pressure situation. It is simply, if you want more information, we can give you an application to take home. And you can reach out to any one of us for additional information on what it costs to join and how the program works. But having the forms available, I think, is important because it gives them something to leave with if they're interested. But at the same time, as Eddie just mentioned, you know, we don't want people to make a decision right away. We'd like them to come back to a couple of meetings, get a feel for the group. Are they the right fit? Is the club the right fit for them? And does it meet their schedule? And these are the types of things where we want members to be active members. We want members to share with us what they're trying to achieve, and our organization supports their goals. One of the things I think we do well, and this is generally presented by the club president or VP of education, is we confirm what the Toastmaster goals are and what the club goals are. So somebody knows early on in the meeting, what's our goal, what's our objective, and how does that support people that come to our meetings, and how does it support our members? And in addition to that, members are expected to support the other members. It's not just receive, but you have to share in the development of others. I think that's a key point, is that participation runs in two directions. That's it for me.
Thank you for that, Jim. Yes, it's reciprocity, right? It's not just up to the officers. As Eddie said, those guests get that name badge that indicates they're guests, and your regular members go up to the guests, talk to them, make them feel like they're invited into the club. And there's opportunities throughout the meeting, inviting the guest up from the first time they're at the meeting. They can do a table topics if they feel they would like to get up and try it out. And then at the very end, what was your impression of the meeting? Their voice is heard. They get to express their feelings about the meeting and get some practice speaking as well. So feeling comfortable from day one as a guest visiting your meeting, key to creating that environment for guests to become members. As you said, this isn't a high pressure situation. Want to make sure that the club is a good fit for the guest that comes, and that they are able to achieve their goals so that they're active members. They're not just going to sit in the back of the room and have regrets that they joined the club because they made a decision too quickly. That doesn't happen here. Let's move on. I want to talk about meeting planning. You already gave a great overview of that whiteboard and then the web form of getting signed up for future meetings. That is advice that all clubs should take. Try to get those meeting roles filled at the very end. Maybe think about using the whiteboard that North Shore Toastmasters is using. But I'd like to talk about now meeting planning in terms of your executive meetings. How are they held? What is discussed? And how do you track items in your executive meeting? Very well organized club. You must have a lot going on behind the scenes. Ed,
Faye raised her hand and she should absolutely speak. But since you called on me, I will say that there are a couple of, they're all laughing. You know me too well. I'll only take 2 minutes. It's a mini speech. Behind the scenes. Something has happened recently at our executive team meetings, and Faye's really been a leader with this. But I'll speak for her because she probably wouldn't be the one to toot her horn, so I'll do it for her. We took some time to think through all the steps in the process of recruiting, welcoming, and signing up a new member. But there are, as you see around the screen, there's 5 of us and there are 2 other absentees, 7-person team who have aspects of the role. It's almost like a relay race. The baton has to be handed to someone else to do the next thing. The treasurer has to do their job. The VP membership has to do their job. We don't call one another to task, but we did take it some time, not too long ago, maybe a year ago now, last summer, and to say, are we covering all the bases? Are there any gaps or lack of follow through in some of the things that could be getting done? And if so, let's take the time to decide, well, who's the best qualified person to do that based on their officer role in the club? And put it into a simple, I hate to use the word spreadsheet. There's a spreadsheet for everything. We've got one for this. We have a spreadsheet that says, okay, in the process flow of a person being welcomed to the club, who gets in touch with them first? And then we figure out who that role it is, and then we put the person's name who's in that role in that column and say, that's your job to do that when this happens. Now, are we 100% airtight with that? No, but having taken the time to think through it and realize how we support one another in making things happen, I think each of us has taken a little bit more of a willing and voluntary, proactive role in making certain that whatever is my ball, I carry that ball until it gets to the next person's hands. It's really been a big help because you could easily forget to do something in all the tumult of coming and going and welcoming and saying thank. It's easy to miss something. And we still do from time to time, but less so than before.
And putting it down in writing, putting on that spreadsheet so that it's very clear for everyone. As you said, we're not perfect, but that is going to help improve that process so everybody knows what the responsibilities are. And so there aren't those gaps. Just having that conversation about, hey, we have a gap here. What do we need to do to fill it? Again, going back to what you learn in leadership by joining the club and becoming part of the executive committee.
And I should mention the other side of the coin of filling in gaps is also avoiding overlap. The last thing you need is 5 people saying, what brought you here? I already told 3 other people. You could easily alienate a guest by having them pull the ring in their back and say the same answer 5 times before they feel overwhelmed, and that perhaps the club is not very well organized. That can be telegraphed based on how you treat them. So we've taken that to heart.
Yes. Too much overlap, lack of organization sends that message. Hey.
I think that role clarity was definitely a key because especially as Ed was saying, when we all shifted roles, we had some new folks like Eddie Rhodes join our leadership team. It was really important early on this Toastmasters year to make sure there was role clarity. Who's responsible for reaching out to guests when? Who is responsible for reminding club members when the next meeting is going to be? So establishing role clarity helped avoid that overlapping redundancy, kind of bumping into each other, Three Stooges style, for those of you who remember what the Three Stooges are. I knew Eddie Rhodes would smile at that one. But the other thing is, we are such a tight-knit group of officers that we communicate constantly during the course of the week and pretty much after every meeting. We all have an unofficial meeting at Sylvan Street Grill on 114 in Danvers. And yeah, we share some cocktails, we have some snacks, and we debrief about the meeting, and we start thinking ahead. So there's a contest coming up. We start thinking ahead about, what are we going to do in terms of an open house this year? So we actually meet probably more frequently than other clubs, but in a much more casual and collaborative way. That's actually the forum of what Ed was saying earlier, where we start to discuss some of our new members. We start discussing some of their growth goals. We start talking about, this guest came in, I didn't get a chance to speak with him. Well, I spoke with him, and it turns out his goal is to try to get a promotion this year. So we have a lot of opportunities in person to share ideas and to share insights about the meeting, our members, and some of our guests. So when I saw this question come through, I thought, wow, there's no lack of an opportunity for this executive team to communicate and discuss strategies that are going to make our club better. It's one of the reasons why I love being an officer so much.
So some insight into how the club operates. Everything you heard tonight, it all starts with those officer meetings. And the fact that it's not just one officer meeting, it's a tight-knit group of officers who even go out. They have some drinks, some food together, enjoy each other, and then talk about Toastmasters, talk about the club. What do the members need? It's not a chore at all. It's a fun time leading the club. Something to keep in mind. If you think just it's a business meeting, an officer meeting, it doesn't have to be that way. It can be fun as well. Take some tips from North Shore Toastmasters. Jim.
I want to add to what we've been discussing here. We do meet in executive session probably at least quarterly, and we address critical club issues. Why are so-and-so's not active? Where are they? We haven't seen them. How are we doing on our membership growth? How are we doing in educating people to take advantage of what's available in pathways? Do we need to plan an open house? Do we need to encourage the rest of the officers or any of the officers? There's officer training coming up twice a year. And we remind all of the executive committee that, look, it's important for us to train new people to train and for their new roles. And we encourage them to sign up for those seminars that are offered by the district. Now, we came up a little bit short. I think somebody missed a half session or one session in the fall, but we clearly got it for the spring training with 4 members meeting the requirement for training. But other things too, preparing the speech contest, talk about a meeting about the election of officers, and to coordinate that and share that. The important part of any of those meetings is that information is shared. More often than not, I'm going to credit Ed here, who during the meetings most often is taking notes that he shares with everybody that evening or the next day. Says, this is what we talked about. This is what we need to do. And the plan is there. That's actually a secretary role, but I'm very comfortable with Ed taking it on from time to time. The point is, we do hold formal executive committee meetings. Recently, we talked about in committee the upcoming election of officers. And you know how that was going to be orchestrated, and that we're going to make sure that we follow the election process as it's defined in Toastmasters to put a leadership team together for next year. And we did that. We did that timely. We had our elections at the last meeting. But the point is, in addition to occasionally meeting casually after a club meeting, we also have formal scheduled Zoom sessions to discuss whatever is critical at that particular time, whether it's membership growth, people paying their dues, scheduling events that the club needs to achieve throughout the course of the year, and talking about training. Are we giving club members the necessary training they need to be effective in their roles through the pathway systems, or even the resources that are available on the Toastmaster website, and also our North Shore website where anybody who's a member can go in and see who's on the schedule for the next meeting. And that's because Ed documents all of that and it's available to us. It's really helpful. But we do have a formal get-together process for the leadership team. But we also don't wait for the next meeting if something comes up that we need to address. And sometimes that can come up in a casual environment, as was stated here earlier. That's it.
Hey,
Yeah, I just want to add to that. And Jim's absolutely right. We definitely have more formal quarterly meetings. I think what really makes those quarterly meetings stand out in my mind is there is an intentional discussion around pain points we've identified in the club that we want to try to address. And I've got two examples in particular. One was that perennial question, how do we get people actually into pathways and doing pathway speeches, right? So that was the topic of one of our recent meetings. And during discussion, I think Pete might have been the one that made the recommendation, or Jim, that we need to recognize when people actually complete certain milestones, a level in pathways. So we started to instill this process of awarding certificates for those who completed a level. And that was just a visual clue to all of the members and prospective guests that pathways is real. There are milestones that you can achieve and you can be recognized for those milestones. So that was an example of a problem that we specifically wanted to try to solve for during one of those quarterly meetings. So I think we do a really good job identifying what pain point we want to try to address in those bigger, more formal meetings. Mentorship was another one. How are we going to define our mentorship program? Because we're finding that we've got some people coming through the doors, Christian, but then, some of them we may not see after the third or the fourth meeting. So how do we retain that interest? And we started really rethinking our mentorship program as well. So I think it's that combination of these formal club officer meetings and then that ebb and flow of communication in between that's allowed us to identify some problems that we want to try to approach strategically, and then check in to make sure that we have accountability and follow through on some of the suggestions and recommendations we're making to solve those problems.
yeah, you said formal meetings, then the ebb and flow. You have the formal discussion, and as Jim elaborated before, it's not just casual meetings at a restaurant somewhere. There's a formal process, but it continues. There's a continuum here. We have the formal meeting, we have the ebb, and I like the ebb and flow that you said, ebb and flow throughout the week where there's communication. And then there's the more of the casual meeting. But in all of this is just one process the executive committee does. That's not just isolated to 1 hour once a month. It's continual and it's constantly evolving of how can we solve problems for our clubs. That's what all leaders do. And you described a process that is a club style of solving problems as an executive committee. It's not just an obligation to show up to that business meeting 1 hour for 1 month and try to solve everything. So think about, for other clubs out there, think about your process of running the club. Is it isolated as a strict business meeting that you put on the calendar and you get done? Or does it have that ebb and flow where you're constantly communicating, you're getting feedback from your meetings, and you're trying to refine them and make them better? That's what I just heard here tonight. Ed?
Not to put too fine a point on it, but I think that I'll get a lot of positive head shakes going on here when I stress that it could be way different if we allow it to be different or less than what it is. I recall in my own memory times when, even as a member of this club, and I've been a member of other clubs as well, where we all have our busy lives, right? We have lives outside of Toastmasters, believe it or not. I know, I'm glad you're sitting for this. The challenge we face in a leadership role, whether it's in Toastmasters or in business or in your life, family life, is that sometimes the size and shape of the role can seem enormous, maybe intimidating, maybe enough to make you check out, tune out, defer, procrastinate comes to mind. And I think one thing that I see in this team, and I'm learning from that too, is that we're here to support one another. So if any of us has a question or thinks about something that we maybe try to do differently or better, you're not afraid to go to that individual and say, hey, you're really doing these things well. I have a question about such and such. Tactfully raise the question and help that person expand in their mind about what their role is or what could be done better or differently. And we help each other do that. Maybe the person I'm asking or approaching isn't the right person. Their role is different. Maybe there's someone else's job it is to do that thing. But we ask about that. And as Faith said, meeting more informally and more frequently that way than just say a quarterly meeting makes the role and the job of being a leader in this club less overwhelming, since it's a topic of conversation on a relatively ongoing basis. And I don't lose any sleep. I think I get as good a good night's sleep as anybody here, probably because I worry less. I know I'm in good hands. And I think I can speak for others when I think they feel the same way. I don't hear anybody saying, I don't have time for this. I'm sorry, I took on a role. I can't do it. If someone needs one of us to stretch in to help them from time to time, we'll do that too. So no one's cast adrift in their role and no one's on an island in their role. We're really here for one another. And frankly, that's what Toastmasters is for, being there for one another.
The leadership core, right? Each of the club officers, they have their defined role in that spreadsheet that you have, but at the end of the day, it's a group that comes together, makes the club run, and puts out that helping hand to others if they need it. I've enjoyed this interview and I want to keep on asking questions, but we can't go too long. It's getting late in the evening. We do have to wrap this interview up. So my last question for tonight, I have to ask all of you, why should somebody come visit North Shore Toastmasters? If it's a mystery to anyone. Ed, Eddie.
I am the newest member, I believe, on this panel. And the reason that I came back and joined the club was because I felt like I was wanted. And that's a nice feeling. You go into a room where you know absolutely nobody. And when the meeting was over, it was like I had just gained a whole pile of new friends. And as it turned out, I have. These are the greatest people that I've worked with in most aspects of my life. And I've been around the corner 2 or 3 times. And the warm and fuzzy feeling that I got, I believe that we impart to any of our guests and new members that come to our club. That's all I got.
The warm feeling, so important, and that's why people come back. They want to feel like this is a club, that they're welcome and they can meet their goals. And that's exactly what that warm feeling is. Jim.
It's not on the list of questions, Chris, but it's really something that we need to at least cover as we wrap up this interview today. And that is a brief discussion about pathways and how that training is delivered to new people. And I want to acknowledge that Pete and I are frequently involved on individual sessions very soon after a member joins Toastmasters. And that Zoom session can run anywhere from 90 minutes, 60 to 90 minutes. And that includes introducing them to the resources that are available on Toastmasters website and hands-on training where the individual is actually doing the navigating on pathways to move from screen to screen to know what resources are available. Because people join Toastmasters for the development resources. And Pathway is probably one of the best resources I've seen for communication development. But you have to guide people through how to get the most out of it. And the sessions that Pete and I have been conducting lately, we believe that accomplish it, because you're not leaving somebody hanging. They join Toastmasters, they've seen a couple of speakers, but how do they get at the resources for their own personal development? Pathways is the answer. Before I forget, Chris, can you give us an update on the LMS and any changes that are coming?
More changes are coming from Toastmaster International in the fall, they say.
Okay, all right. Pete, feel free to chime in here on the training.
Tim, I'll add to, what you just reviewed. I think our club helps members achieve their goals. To your point, Jim, early on, we asked members, what are their goals? Kind of glean that sometimes member just like to come in, they need to give a speech, maybe at a town meeting or possibly a speech at a wedding. That's their goal, to get through that. We help them with that. Others come in and they may have been involved in like healthcare, one-on-one healthcare, and they're promoted to team leader. Now they want to learn how to move. They aspire to an executive role, and they would like to come to our club for leadership. We give those opportunities to become club members. And there's also other members that we've had that have come to our club and have wanted to compete in a speech contest, and we've had several successful members that have competed and won in speech contests up to the district level. So I also see that our club, why join the North Shore Toastmasters? We help members achieve their goals. Back to you.
Help members achieve their goals regardless of where they are on the speaking experience realm. Okay.
You know, I had a guest say this to us a few months ago, and when she said it, I thought, you know, I hadn't heard that. It seems so obvious. But I think one of the biggest values you get from joining Toastmasters in general, but especially North Shore Toastmasters, is the real meaningful feedback you get. Everybody comes in thinking, I want to become a better speaker. I just need to practice. That's an absolute. You have to put your reps in. We say that frequently. But I think it's the real intentional, really careful, meaningful feedback that each presenter gets that is really the recipe for success. To have an opportunity to practice in a safe space and have someone specifically listening and providing feedback that's just going to make you that much better for the next time, I really think is the recipe for success. I will say we've got some really wonderful evaluators on in our club roster right now. That anybody that goes up there feels like they got better, not just through practice, but just by getting that meaningful feedback.
Right. It's not just about speaking. It's about how can you get better at speaking as well. And Ed, you just unmuted. Did you want to say something?
Moi? Well, if you insist.
You have to. You're the only one who hasn't said something in the conclusion. The floor is yours.
My opening conclusion is this. If you, whoever you are out there in the world, have been watching this video cast hosted by Christian Austin, and you've made it this far, what is left but for you to attend, if not a North Shore Toastmasters Club meeting, perhaps a meeting close to you, somewhere else in the cosmos? There are plenty of clubs. You're out of excuses. In terms of why someone would want to join Toastmasters, I'll get back to that basic question that you asked in conclusion. Summarizing what we've heard here, you get all the practical experience you can shake a stick at. Practice, practice, practice. You know, there's an emblem at one point in time where Toastmasters International had a logo with a little caption under it. And underneath that globe with the Toastmasters label over it, there was a caption that said, "Where leaders are made." And that really burned me because sure, that's how you help become a leader by getting practice. But I really wish you said where mistakes are made. Because this is the learning lab where you get to practice, falling on your face. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong. And this is your preparation for real life, for when you're going for that promotion or that interview or that speech on a stage. We prepare you, we Toastmasters, not just our club, but any club, prepares you for that real life experience by letting you fall on stage in front of a supportive group. You know, we're your wings, we're your audience, we're in your corner. We're here to help you get better at that thing you want to learn to do. You didn't get it in school, you didn't get it in college, where are you going to get it? You're out of excuses. Join a Toastmasters club. I'm out.
As Ed said, you're out of excuses. Time to join a Toastmasters club. Can you tell us how somebody can join one of your North Shore Toastmasters meetings?
Certainly, I'll take that. I'm the webmaster. You can go to the Toastmasters International website. And if you happen to live on the North Shore of Boston, you use the Find a Club lookup feature right on the homepage. Type in your zip code, I guess, or your city or state where you live, and up will pop a list of nearby clubs. And if you live in our neighborhood, you'll find ours. It's that simple. You don't have to memorize a website address, none of that. Just go to toastmasters.org. That's all you have to remember. Use the lookup search feature. You'll find us. Love to have you. Hope to see you soon. Thanks.
Thank you, Ed. And as you get to the end of this video, you will see a closing slide with all the information you'll need to visit North Shore Toastmasters. In conclusion, I'd like to rephrase what I heard during this interview. You walk into an auditorium, a speaking venue that indicates a serious speaking situation, an audience, a stage, speakers that are both like you and that you aspire towards. That's what North Shore Toastmasters has. But before you even attend a meeting, you'll probably receive a personalized phone call where the club will learn about what your goals are. There's an intentional agenda. 1 or 2 minute mini speeches, a word of the day, tips, etc. to start the meeting off to get you as a guest involved as soon as you'd like to be. You'll see well-organized meetings because the club leadership tackles problems and is constantly trying to improve. Whether it's pathways, mentorship, diversity of membership in the club, leadership discusses all of that and tries to get better each meeting that they have. They're a learning lab, so don't be afraid to fail. Maybe that should be the logo under Toastmasters International. Take a minor speaking role and the opportunity to get involved and begin to grow from day one while having fun. Meetings are run for guests, which sets a precedent. An hour orientation, that's what you'll get, maybe even 90 minutes in pathways training when you join the club. You're not going to be left to fend for yourself. You'll get constructive evaluations, which are the recipe for success. And for those who are wondering, if I attend a meeting, am I going to be pressured? Non-pressure situation to join the club. The club encourages you to look at other clubs, decide if North Shore Toastmasters is going to be a good fit, because they want all of their members to be active members. And as Eddie said, the club is just like family. North Shore Toastmasters, it's been a pleasure doing a panel discussion with you. And for a successful Select Distinguished year this year, I'm wishing you an even better next Toastmasters year. Thank you all for joining me in Club Close Up.